The purpose of this training is about how to make those ideas of yours as incredibly successful as possible, to make your ideas inspirational, to make them memorable, to have them affect change among the people that are in your audience for your message, to have them travel well on their own. So if your ideas are sticky, they have kind of those attributes, that they're inspirational, memorable, affect change, stand the test of time, and travel well on their own. That's our goal for the next 45 minutes or so. And I want to start by telling you a story. And some of you may have heard this, and if you have, I just ask you to humor me and stay quiet and let the rest of the group catch up. It's a very short one. So, and it was in the news actually not too long ago. A businessman was on a trip to Terre Haute, Indiana, I believe it was. And it's a trip he'd made many times before. He worked at Boeing Corporation, so he was a Boeing Corporation executive. And he made the same trip often, and it was always the same way. He'd fly into town the night before the meeting, stay at the same hotel, have dinner at the hotel restaurant, walk across the lobby of the hotel to the hotel bar, have the same drink, go to bed, get up, have his meeting the next morning, and then fly back home to Seattle. This trip was just like any other, followed the same pattern. Same hotel, same dinner, across the lobby to the same bar, having the same drink, and that's when things changed. They weren't quite the same as they had been the last several times he'd made that trip. A couple of guys came up to him in the bar and said, "Hey, the bartender tells us that you work at Boeing, is that right?" And the guy says, "Well, yeah, I do." And they said, "You know, that's great, because we work at the local steel fabrication mill. Turns out to be the place he's visiting tomorrow, his supplier." And they said, "Our bosses have told us this for a long time, but you know, we work there, all of our buddies from high school work there, our dads worked there, and they've always told us that if Boeing hadn't been such a good customer of ours, they would have shut our plant down years ago. And so we're happy to meet you, and we'd be flattered if you'd let us buy you a drink." And you know, the guy was very flattered actually, and said, "Well, yeah, sure," and told him what he was drinking, and they ran off to, one of the guys ran off to get that drink from the bartender, and the other one sat down, and they started having a great conversation. About 3 minutes into the conversation, the Boeing Corporation executive loses all memory of what happens for the next 3 hours, okay? 3 hours later, the guy wakes up in his hotel room, in the bathtub, with almost all of his clothing removed and ice covering his whole body, okay? So, and he's obviously been drugged somehow, and he's kind of groggy and coming out of it, and the only thing he notices that he recognizes is on the ledge of the bathtub is his cell phone, with a note attached to it in somebody else's handwriting. And what the note says is, "Don't move, call 911. So the guy's pretty scared, and he's still groggy, but he's kind of shaky. He manages to pick up the phone and peck out 911. And as he's explaining a situation, the 911 operator is oddly familiar with his predicament. And after he finishes telling her, he says, "So what's happening?" And she says, "Sir, please be calm, but I need you to reach down behind your back and tell me if there is a small tube sticking out of the small of your back." And the guy does, and sure enough there is, and he tells her, and again he demands, "What's going on?" And she says, "Sir, don't panic, but there's a kidney heisting ring in town, and it looks like they got to you. Stay where you are, don't move, help is already on the way." Okay, I can see some of you out there. Let me see by a show of hands. How many of you have heard that story or something like it sometime in your life? Okay, about half of you. Okay, how many of you heard that on the internet, read it on the internet? Okay, heard it from a friend, teacher, somebody? Okay. The best I can, well, first of all, it's not true, okay, so relax. The best I can tell, that story was started over a decade ago when the date rape drug roofie was first introduced to the marketplace. And the story was obviously to frighten young people away from accepting drinks from strangers, okay? And it was very effective, incredibly effective, in fact. In fact, it's one of the most successfully spread urban legends on the internet since the development of the internet. Now, why would I tell you such a story? The point is, that story is sticky. It has all of the attributes that we just talked about being, you know, it certainly would inspire somebody to change their behavior, motivate them to change their behavior in a social setting like that. You know, they'll remember it forever. You know, you'll remember it for a long time if you haven't, you know, even if you're just hearing it today for the first time. But that's the kind of effect you want your information, your idea to have on people, that strong of a reaction and that strong of a success in communicating your idea. So how do you do that without scaring people about having their kidneys stolen. Well, that's the good news. It's easier to do than that. And actually, there's a book that came out a couple of years ago that really documents how do you do that? How do you make your ideas sticky? And basically, the authors of this book looked back over the entire really written history of mankind to find the most successful and sticky ideas that they could. Everything from as far back as Proverbs in the Bible to Aesop's fables, to corporate dictums from CEOs like a Jack Welch that really transformed an organization, to urban myths spread on the internet, to find out what is it about those that are really successful and sticky, what do they have that the ones that aren't don't have. And they basically concluded there are 6 things, and these are them. Sticky ideas are simple, not complex. For example, the story I just told you. I told you in less than a minute and a half. It's a pretty simple idea. You could repeat it yourself, probably verbatim now, and you'd remember most of the details tomorrow, the next day, the next week, the next year. Simple ideas are easier for people to remember, they're easier for people to understand, and they're easier for people, therefore, to repeat to other people. Okay? Secondly, sticky ideas have an element of the unexpected in them. There's a surprise. Was there a surprise somewhere in the story I just told you? Yeah, guy gets his kidney stolen, right? Excuse me. So unexpected ideas are much easier for people to remember. There's something about them, and Delane can probably tell you much better than I can, there's something about the way the brain forms memory associations that surprises, unexpected events get encoded much more strongly than things that people expected to be the case anyway. Okay? Thirdly, concrete. Sticky ideas are concrete and specific. Concrete ideas are easier for people to understand, and most importantly, easier for people to apply to their life and their situation. Okay, the story I just told you was very concrete. It was about a specific guy in a specific hotel that got his kidney stolen. Okay, I didn't tell you a story about a crime wave hitting the Midwest. Okay, that's very vague and general and abstract. I told you a very concrete story. All right. Fourthly, credible, and that maybe goes without saying, but people tend to believe things from a source that they trust and believe. Now, in the first 5 minutes here, I've already told you a fib, so I'm not sure if my credibility is really high with you right now, but I promise you that it was for a purpose, and it'll make sense to you over the next few minutes. All right, fifthly, emotional. Emotional ideas, more so than rational, logical ones, are far more sticky. So they are easier to remember for some of the same reasons that unexpected things are. There's more ways for the brain to encode and remember an emotional idea. But probably most importantly, emotional ideas motivate people to behavior, okay? Emotion leads to passion, passion leads to commitment, commitment to doing the thing that it is you want them to go do. If people don't care about your idea, they don't have any emotional attachment to it whatsoever, even if they understand it, remember it, believe it, if they don't care about it, they're not going to do anything about it. So you need to have some kind of an emotional angle to your story. And then lastly, it needs to be a story. Your idea needs to be communicated in a story, not a set of facts. So the story I told you about the guy getting his kidney stolen was a story. It wasn't like a newspaper article would read, Dateline, Terre Haute, Indiana, man gets kidney stolen in hotel bathroom, and then all of the gory details underneath that. I told you a story with a little bit of character development, a little plot development, a twist at the end. It was a story. It unfolded the way you naturally like to tell and hear stories. A story doesn't have to be long like that one. It wasn't. It just needs to be told properly. Your idea needs to be communicated in a story. So these are the 6, okay? If your ideas have these kind of criteria, they will have the attributes that you want them to have, that they will inspire people, motivate them to behavior, etc.